Chronicles of Eberron released around 3 months ago, the first major new Eberron book since the digital-only Dread Metrol, which released in July of 2021. So why is this just a first impressions and not a full review? Well, first, I was only just able to get through the entire book once so far. Life, work, and other videos got in the way of getting through it quickly. But also that for a review, I want to be able to really absorb and preferably make use of the material before writing such a piece. And that is still quite a while off, I'd say. But anyone still on the fence about buying Chronicles should hopefully get enough information about it to decide if you want a copy too. If you think any of my assessments are wrong, make your opinions known in the comments. Chronicles of Eberron was released on the 1st of December 2022. This channel covered lead up to the release, so if you want that background, those videos will be in the description. The release was via the DM's Guild, that is the online storefront, which is a partnership between DriveThruRPG and Wizards of the Coast. So, the release does have the full license to use Eberron and D&D material. The book is a Together Studios production written by Keith Baker and Imogen Gingell. The DM's Guild has a number of publishing options. The most common and least expensive of these options are PDFs. They also do versions compatible with virtual tabletops and hardcover and softcover printed versions, though those last options are generally only available to books that achieve bestseller status or are expected to meet that threshold prior to release. For Chronicles of Eberron, Together and the Guild decided that 3 options would be available to start: PDF, standard color hardcover, and premium color hardcover, with costs increasing as you ascend in print quality. There are also options to get a PDF included with a printed book. I, of course, chose every option, so have a PDF and both print qualities to show you all. Immediately upon purchase, you receive the option to download the PDF, which is watermarked to the purchaser. The printed media takes a little longer. The physical books are printed on demand, so that means they are made with a process that's closer to an inkjet printer and not normal offset printing plates used for most publishing. That also means they can't use the normal glossy paper used in your player's handbook or copy of Rising from the Last War either. The paper is much more matte, which can accept this specific printing technique. The on-demand printing also means that it can take a few days before the book is printed before they can actually ship it to you, depending on how busy the printer is at the time of your order. My own copies were ordered within an hour or so of the release, which was on a Thursday, and it was in the hands of the courier on the following Tuesday morning. So only 3 business days. And then I had the package in hand a week later, making it less than 2 weeks from order to delivery, once weekends were accounted for, even with pre-holidays courier traffic. But considering that includes printing and going over the border from the US to Canada, I'd say it was incredibly quick. Ordering from within the US will likely be even quicker. The books arrived packaged quite well in this breakaway cardboard, as you can see here. The covers are printed to a very high quality, commensurate with a WotC publication, and indistinguishable between the premium and standard printing from the outside. You need to open them to see the difference. The premium print has richer colors and deeper blacks than the standard, but both are very good once the matte paper is taken into account. Physically, prints from the Guild are similar in size to standard WotC books, just slightly bigger. Chronicles itself is 207 pages long. Those pages are broken up into 2 parts, 97 pages for part 1 and 108 for part 2. The parts are further broken down into chapters. There are 8 of those chapters in part 1 and 14 in part 2. Each chapter covers a different topic, though are not equivalent in length. They range from 2 pages to up to over 30 pages long. The topics in Part 1, called The Library, are mostly player-focused, while those in Part 2, The Vault, are more Dungeon Master-focused. The topics seem to be grouped up into thematic sections, like chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all about ancestries in Eberron, starting in on adding new ancestries into Eberron, then followed by chapters on the Ternadel elves, and 2 chapters on gnomes from specific places, the islands of Lorgallon in the Lizar Principalities, and the Phasebire Pilus Imperial. Another grouping in the library are the first 3 chapters, which are about covering regular life in Corvair, looking at common knowledge, arms and armor development, and nobility. Part 1 is wrapped up with a chapter with no theme group, but makes that up by being the longest chapter in the book. It covers the faith of the Dark Six in great depth, and from many perspectives. The Vault also has sections of thematic chapters. The first and second stick to topics around running specific aspects of Eberron. The first about running Session 0 before a campaign begins, followed by methods of running travel in Eberron, as there are many ways you can do that depending on the needs of your gaming group or game genre that you're using, like if you're leaning into the pulp aspects of Eberron. You could also wrap the final chapter, High Level Adventures, in with this grouping, but instead it actually appears at the end, as it appears they wanted to flow the chapter on travel into the next grouping of chapters, which are about locations in Eberron that have almost exclusively been treated as places to travel through, and not adventure locations unto themselves. These chapters are on the Astral Plane and the Barren Sea, respectively. Then follows a trio of chapters regarding fiends. First, a very useful overview of just about every overlord that has been mentioned in Eberron books, magazines, and articles, and some introduced for the first time, or pulled from novels. Next comes a chapter on Ashtakala, the headquarters of the Lords of Dust, and it's revealed the city is an overlord itself. Then, to close the section, a chapter on the Dawn War between the overlords and the allied dragons and coatls. The next theme is undead, with 3 chapters, covering them in general in Ghost Stories of Eberron, which will be useful to me personally once I start hitting the undead entries in my Monster Manual A to Z series, as before this, many of the undead types had little to no mention in any Eberron books. This chapter is then followed on by additional undead leaders of the principalities beyond Lady Ilmarrow. And then there's a in-depth look at Carnathi Undead. After the undead theme, the book has 2 chapters on high-level threats, looking at Avash, the Dalkir Lord of Plants, and Mordain the Flesh Weaver, the Twisted Wizard Crafter of Flesh. Other than the high-level Avengers chapter I mentioned that closes out the book, there is the second largest chapter, which takes a detailed look at Rirdra, first looking at their society and psionics in 5th edition. Then a final look at all of the provinces. So this video is not the one where I'm gonna look too deeply at any of these topics. That's for the review at some point in the future. But I do want to share some of my thoughts after the initial read-through. In no particular order, first, the structure and editing. I gotta say, the copy editing is great. There was only one typo I caught going through the book, which is better than most WotC books, and an errata document released only has a small number of minor errors, and if you buy the PDF, those changes have already been fixed in the body. Print copies are based on the 1.0 version, so we'll still have them. I do see some issues with the creative choices made in the editing, however, and a lot of that might go back to the book's origins. Chronicles of Eberron started out as blog posts on Keith Baker's website. And without even directly comparing to archived versions of the original articles, I can really feel the difference between this book and the average D&D publication. They still have a lot of that same feeling as an online post. Individual chapters move between more standard third-person omniscient viewpoint, recounting information about the world, and then move into a more conversational style where it's more like Keith Baker's directly talking to you and explaining how to use the concepts. This can be jarring, as usually when D&D books make use of that second style, it is delineated into sidebars or is within sections involving rules. But here, it can switch multiple times within a chapter, just with new headings breaking things up. Beyond the tone, artifacts of its blog origins remain. There's a point where a passage says something to the effect of, "In this article." There are also places where it feels like two articles on similar topics were mashed together. That's especially true in the chapter on adding ancestries to Eberron, where I believe the bulk of the chapter was sourced from one article, but other elements were pulled from others, and some of it I believe was written brand new in responses to changes in Monsters of the Multiverse to goblinoids and changelings, and new rules for living constructs were added in Spelldrummer via the Autognome. These new ideas weren't long enough for their own chapter, but also feel slightly out of place in this chapter, which is otherwise about adding new peoples into the world. Overall, I think the book would have worked better if it didn't try to stick to that first half being the player half and the second half being the DM half. Perhaps fewer, longer chapters based on themed lines. So something like chapters called Running the Game, Life in Corvair, Ancestries, The Dark Six, Undead of Eberron, Fiends of Eberron, etc. Then breaking those chapters down into the sections on the individual topics within. I think that would have allowed the different tones to work better, as the different sections would be more effectively communicated. As it is now, you think one chapter should read similarly all the way through, but it doesn't. Despite these complaints, the prose reads very well and has a ton of great information. There are topics never covered before and ones only briefly covered previously. The details of nobility are especially useful. Even within the topics that had extensive coverage before, especially Rhiedra and the Dark Six in Secrets of Sarlona and Faiths of Eberron, Chronicles is able to avoid retreading the same ground and expands on the topics in useful ways. I have found that much of the new material that 4th edition added to Eberron has been given short shrift in subsequent writing, so I do like the quotes from those books specifically and attention to original material, like the Face Buyers. I also really like how quotes taken from previous publications begin many of the topics. These quotes, plus the references directing the reader back to the original material, are very useful. Getting you back to the original sources is something this channel also strives to do too. I also love that sensitivity is given to some topics. The Session 0 chapter talks extensively about ensuring your group is comfortable with the style of story that is going to be told, and suggests using safety tools, which is always a positive thing to do. We also see a great replacement name for the dwarf culture of northern Sarlona, now called the Doriac. Little care had been given before, and they had been called the Akiak, which inadvertently appropriated the native Alaskan tribal community's name, which is definitely unjust. This channel will follow suit and only call them the Doriac from this point on. Finally, to close out on the written content, this book briefly has the discussion of Eberron canon and introduces a term that has been used online for many years: canon, but with a K for Keith Baker. Canon being changes to the setting Keith usually makes in his own games, and any new material written for his blog. I do think this discussion is an important one, as not all material is of equal quality or value. I really should make a video about how this channel treats canon too, but this book does add to the conversation. I don't have a lot to say right now about the new game design elements within the book, as that requires a different set of analysis tools than I was using in this reading. There are some stat blocks for powerful enemies who didn't have them, some new subclasses which look thematically interesting, and the psionic feats all seem very compelling. Though, the bulk of the new game elements are for the Dark 6 chapter. I would say that Imogen Gingell, who did the majority of the design, did so admirably, based on my preliminary reading. They don't look too far out of line power-wise with the rest of 5th edition, and hit on good niches not served by other existing game elements I've seen. Finally, the art in the book is very high quality. On average, I would say the art is better than Exploring Eberron. We're using many of the same artists who provided the best pieces in that book, and not including a few of the artists who didn't quite reach their. For a company with a much lower art budget than, say, Wizards of the Coast, I have to commend art director Wayne Chang in gathering such a cohort. There are pieces I am curious about, like the new holy symbols for the Dark Six. I am quite interested in why they decided to commission brand new designs instead of creating new versions of the icons as they appeared in the 3.5 Player's Guide to Eberron. They, of course, couldn't use the original images from that book for licensing reasons, but they could have easily requested new variants based on the same description. So my overall impression of the book, it's great. Almost every player or DM is going to find at least one of the chapters relevant to their character or campaign, especially the big chapters on the Dark Six and Rudra. I hope the team at Together are able to continue putting out similar books in between their larger projects like Threshold, as Keith does a lot of writing in his blog and Patreon, and a lot of it is really interesting, and I'd like it in a fixed, permanent form. Hopefully, Chronicles 2 will feature a heavier hand in the creative editing, and be molded something that reads closer to Exploring Eberron, next time at least. Even if not, I will be first in line to buy it. Next video, I'm gonna finally get to a topic I said I'd get back to in one of the channel's earliest videos. We'll be in the Kornberg Library, giving an introduction to the Inspired of Sarlona. Until then, you can follow the Eberron Archaeologist on social media to get news on the channel, and on Instagram specifically, I try to post information and pictures about Eberron miniatures just about every week.